All right, I think all three platforms are live now, so just gotta wait for one more minute. Okay, I think they it's right on time. Hold on. Okay, there we go. All right, I'm gonna hit the start button now, Doc.
Sure. Yeah.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thanks for attending today's webinar. Today we have the honor to invite Dr. Gad Lavy from Connecticut, Connecticut, and we will have a educational webinar on the IVF and surrogacy during this uncertain time. You know, there's IVF and surrogacy have become even more challenging, considering we hear the recent news. You know how it negatively impact male fertility, your sperm count, etc. So we're gonna go. Dr. Lavy gonna go through the IVF. Maybe we'll add a little bit on the COVID-19 side. You know how you navigate through this difficult time, and I will touch on the topics of a surrogacy, how you get matched, and the cost of a surrogacy. What are the financing options? And in general, what do we do to ensure that you would have a smooth journey? There's quite a bit of overlap. Clinic will handle the medical clearance and the transfer and all that. So we're gonna go to that later on. So without further ado, I'm gonna pass the mic to you, Dr. Lavy.
Thank you, Bai, very much. And it's a pleasure and an honor to be invited to this webinar. And thank you for all of you who are out there, whether it's morning, afternoon, or night, wherever you are. So my name is Dr. Lavy. I'm the director and the founder of the New England Fertility Institute. And I would like to take a few minutes to try and give you a lot of information. I've tried to condense it as much as possible. I'd like to talk to you about the surrogacy egg donation process, the way we do it, and sort of give you sort of a step-by-step of how the process is done. And of course, I'd like it to, as Bai mentioned, I mean, these are sort of strange times with COVID and how that impacts what we do. And I'd like to maybe spend a few minutes talking about that. So this is our clinic. Our clinic is located in Connecticut, in Stamford, Connecticut. And as you see here with those little arrows, we are practicing very strict COVID protocols to make sure that we keep everyone safe, our staff and our patients. I just wanted to give you sort of a quick overview of who we are and how we will do our best to help you achieve your goal, and how we will work with Patriot Conception to make your process simple, safe, and successful. So we'll talk a little bit about why we're successful, our experience, how we provide the service, the convenience of being in Connecticut, and cost. And as I said, I will mention how we manage, how we work through and around the COVID-19 pandemic. So in 2 words about myself, I've had about 30 years of experience in the field. My training is in fertility and IVF. And over the last few years, because of my interest and my passion for this particular area, I've focused on what we call third-party reproduction, which is egg donation and surrogacy. You know, our clinic practices a state-of-the-art technology for IVF, which basically translate into doing genetic testing on all of our embryos and freezing all of the embryos. That allows us to actually get a very high success, which is up to 80% for a single embryo transfer. And because of our particular interest in egg donation and surrogacy, naturally we also work with individuals and couples, not only in the US, but also internationally. So we have a lot of experience navigating those challenges of especially now working with people who are not in the US. As far as our location, we're very convenient to the New York airports. We're about 1 hour away from JFK and LaGuardia. So we're on the East Coast. And even though we are convenient to the airports, and even though in the past we actually asked that you would come to us to start your journey, we're now, because of COVID, have realized that there are different ways to doing it, and we're able to actually allow you to start the journey without coming here and allowing you to freeze the sperm wherever you are and ship it to us. And as I said, collaborating with Patriot Surrogacy is key with their experience and their resources, and allows us to basically make it simple, safe, and hopefully successful. Our clinic is relatively small. I'm the only physician. I have a great and very friendly staff, because I always felt that the emotional part of this process is very, very important. So we have basically, we call them journey coordinators, or coordinators that will basically be your case manager, someone who will follow you through the process and different points, and will know your case very well, and they're the ones that are going to help you navigate through all the different parts of this process that I'll show you in a minute. And for our Mandarin-speaking clients, we have a Mandarin-speaking coordinator that, again, will make the process a little bit more convenient. And I think Bai will talk about the financial part, but we will offer different packages because, again, we're aware of the fact that this is an expensive proposition, an expensive process. And I think that if there is a will, we always find a way to make it work. So to make it sort of, just to keep it simple, when we talk about the process of surrogacy IVF, we talk about three parts. We talk about the sperm, we talk about the eggs, and we talk about the uterus. So in this case, we hopefully will be able to use your sperm. Of course, there's always the option of using a sperm donor. For eggs, we can use, your female partner's eggs or an egg donor. And of course, we'll use a surrogate that will carry the pregnancy. So I will focus on these three components in the next few minutes. So as far as the medical screening, I'm just showing you here what we do to make sure that we pick the best egg donors and the best surrogates. So both the egg donor and the surrogates go through a very, very extensive, detailed screening, which includes a medical evaluation, overall looking at their general health. For the egg donors, we also want to make sure that they have good eggs, what we call the ovarian reserve. So, and then we do also very in-depth psychological evaluation to make sure, of course, that they're psychologically intact, sound, healthy, but also to make sure that they realize or they understand what they're going or putting themselves through, that they have a full understanding of what impact that may have for them in the future. Because we're very careful for both the egg donor and the surrogate to make sure that they have a good experience and they have no regrets after going through the process. For the egg donor, but not for the surrogate, we of course do a very, very detailed genetic screening. Make sure that there's no medical conditions in the family, and also to make sure that there is a genetic compatibility between you and the egg donor. And of course, we do infectious disease testing for both. For the egg donor in particular is a requirement by the FDA here, but to make sure again that they don't carry any medical conditions and to make sure that the surrogate is protected. As far as the sperm, as I mentioned, we will do an evaluation of the sperm to make sure the sperm is good and it can be used for IVF. And as I said, all this can be done locally. So we have actually changed our practices because of COVID. In the past, we used to actually ask you to come to the US, to come to our clinic, to give us a sperm sample, and we would then keep the sample, freeze it, and then use it later on for the fertilization. And what we've learned that, that actually step may not be necessary. Of course, you're always welcome to come in, but because of the difficulties in travel, we can actually start the process without you coming here. So essentially, we will help you arrange, or we'll find a place where you can go that will safely and securely freeze your sperm and do all the testing that we would have done if you were here. And then we arrange for that sample to be shipped to us and kept frozen until a point where we need to use it. So in other words, the first step in the process, which is usually looking at the sperm and making sure the sperm is okay, can be done locally. And here in this slide, I show you in basically in one picture, the entire process. And of course, we're talking about the IVF process, in vitro fertilization, and we're doing the process in two very distinct parts. The first part is where we create the embryos. In order to do that, we need the sperm and we need the eggs. So in this case, if it's going to be your sperm, we make sure we have the sperm in our clinic. And then we will help you in collaboration with the Patriot Conception, find an egg donor. Once we have the egg donor, once we have your sperm, we can make the embryos. We create the embryos after the donor has been on medication for a couple of weeks. And those eggs are harvested, they're fertilized. We grow the embryos in the laboratory for a few days just to see which of those embryos is the most viable, the strongest. And then we also do some genetic testing to make sure that they're also genetically normal. And once those tests are done, the embryos are frozen, and they can stay frozen for a week, a month, a year, without impacting their viability in any way. So we have those embryos in frozen storage. We have all the information, the genetic information on those embryos. And by the way, when you do the genetic testing for the embryos, of course, you can also find out what the gender is. And if you want to use that in your journey, that's absolutely fine. And then once the surrogate is identified, once we find the surrogate and she completes her screening and she completes the legal process and all the things that are required, we then will bring her in and start preparing her for what we call the frozen embryo transfer, the FET. And usually within 3 weeks of starting her cycle, after being on some hormone medication, she'll be ready to receive the embryo. And so at that point, we take out usually one embryo and put it in her uterus. The reason I say usually one is this is always my preference because we are trying to avoid any kind of complications in the pregnancy. So we try to avoid having multiple pregnancies, twins, triplets, and so forth. And the thing is that with all the testing that we do on the embryos, we're able to get very high success even with a single embryos. So in the olden days of IVF, which is 5 or 10 years ago, we used to actually transfer several embryos with the hopes that one of them takes, and sometimes none took, some of them, sometimes one took, and sometimes all took, and we ended up with a problem. So nowadays you have more success and more control. Now, having said that, if you are interested in having what we call a twin journey, in other words, having twins, we can discuss that, and then we will have to find a surrogate who is not only willing to carry twins, but based on her medical history, is also able to carry twins. So if we transfer 2 embryos to the surrogate, the chances of her becoming pregnant is over 90%, and 60 or 70% of those pregnancies will be twins. So that's, again, something that we discuss in our initial consultation, and we will try to the best of our ability to accommodate your requirements, your needs. The egg donor, as I said, we pick them very carefully. to make sure that they have good eggs and to make sure that they're healthy. So the donor goes through the medication and usually generates somewhere between 15 and 20 eggs. And if once you go down this process of fertilizing the eggs and growing them and testing them, usually end up with about 5 or 6 genetically normal embryos. So it sounds like a big drop from 20 to 6, but just keep in mind that those are the best of the best. Those embryos have a very, very high chance of success. And in the surrogacy process, when you listen to all these descriptions, it sounds, somewhat complex and sometimes maybe a little bit intimidating in a way, because there's many different moving parts, many different things have to happen and have to happen just right. I tried to list here how we work with the Surrogacy Agency. And for me, having a good connection, a good relationship with the agency is key, because many of those things that I list here have to happen at the same time, and many of them happen behind the scene. So we try, to the best of our ability to remove all those stressors from you and just allow you to focus on the important parts of the process. So for example, I'll just quickly show you, the agency will find a surrogate that meets your requirement. They will follow the medical criteria that we provide as far as her health and how many pregnancies she's had and cesarean sections and other medical issues. Once the surrogate is identified, the clinic will do her medical review. So I check her medical records, make sure that she's okay, and then we will bring her to the clinic to complete her evaluation. Once the evaluation is complete, you will go back to the agency and they will help you finalize the legal contract. And once the legal contract is done, and if you remember, by then, usually the embryos are already frozen in storage, we can complete the medical procedure. The agency, and Bai will explain that, will also help with financial arrangements with the surrogate and provide support during the pregnancy. I will be in charge. I will be the doctor of record or the surrogate's doctor for the first trimester of her pregnancy. So even if she's not local to us, I'm still responsible. I'm still in charge. And once she gets to the end of the first trimester and the pregnancy is going well, we will discharge her to the care of her OBGYN. A few words about COVID-19. Because that of course has come to dominate everything that we do or think nowadays. And for many people, it was sort of a pause to say, well, maybe it's not a good time to have a baby. Maybe we should wait. And I'm just sort of my thoughts about the COVID are here, and I'll explain in a minute why. So when the COVID first hit was in March, we closed the clinic. Because we really weren't sure exactly what it means for pregnant women, for the babies, and so forth. And we started to gather data, to gather information. And with all that information, I became comfortable opening up again in May. But then I said, well, we're going to open, we're going to do everything, we're going to have all these protocols in place, but are people actually going to come? Because, who knows what the people are thinking. And surprisingly, actually, it's been really, really busy. I think people have maybe had time to think about their life and priorities and decided that they would like to start a family now. And what I can tell you that from my standpoint, we can do a lot to make sure that COVID-19 does not affect the outcome of your pregnancy. So I say here, don't panic, of course. You have to respect the virus. You don't ignore it. You respect it. You have to educate yourself. And you basically have to learn to live with the new reality. One thing that is very important to understand is that, all the testing, all the studies that have been done show that basically the following things. So first of all, the virus does not show up in sperm or in eggs. So it has, the virus has certain propensity to certain organs, like the lungs, for example, but it doesn't go to the reproductive organs. The other thing that's very important, of course, is to make sure that the virus doesn't cross to the baby. So if a pregnant woman develops COVID, we wanted to make sure that the baby doesn't get the disease. Because, for example, we have a bad experience from Zika virus that does cross to the baby and cause a lot of damage. So there's been a lot of studying, and basically the conclusion is that it's very, very unusual, highly unusual, that the virus crosses to the baby. So that was very reassuring. And the other thing that for me was very important is to make sure that a woman who's pregnant doesn't have a worse course of the COVID compared to a woman who's not pregnant. And there's been more and more data that's coming in that shows this to be true, that women, because mostly they're young and healthy, even if they develop the condition during pregnancy, they usually, it's not a very severe condition. So all these things told me that it's okay to start and that there's no need to wait until the pandemic is over. Having said that, of course, we pay a lot of attention, and I spend a lot of time speaking to the surrogates, making sure that they understand what they need to do to keep themselves safe, what they do, what their husband does, what the children do, her children, and make sure that they create a safe environment. So once they understand it, and I have to say, and this is true in general about surrogates, that the surrogates are highly, highly motivated to do a good job. In fact, I find often that they take better care of themselves when they're pregnant with your child compared to their own pregnancy. So it's really more about making sure that we're all on the same page. We test the surrogates throughout the process. And of course, if they have to travel to the clinic, we make sure that they do it in a safe manner. And here again, just to show you again, because that's really, really important, is that they've done studies looking at women who developed COVID and looking at their babies. And they looked at virus in the nasopharynx, and where normally the virus is. They didn't find any. They looked at virus in the amniotic fluid around the baby. They didn't find it. Cord blood, breast milk. So in other words, the virus does not cross to the baby. And just to finalize, basically, how to start the process and the timeline, just to give you a general idea. So like I said, we usually start with creating the embryos, which means that you'll get your sperm frozen, you'll find an egg donor, and then immediately we will start creating the embryos. Now, generally, most people, just because they want basically to have the baby in a reasonable time span, they usually start this all in parallel. So they start working on getting the sperm, they start looking for an egg donor, and then they start looking for a surrogate. And typically, for most people, they find the egg donor and they have the sperm before they have the surrogate. So as I said, the embryos are created and frozen. You find the surrogate, she is approved, you complete the legal process, and then you schedule the embryo transfer. So from start to finish, I'd say the timeline, conservatively, from if you start today, there's a very good probability that you'll have a baby within about 18 months. So I think that's sort of a realistic timeline. I just wanted to give you the contact. This is my contact, my email, my cell phone. I'm very hands-on. I'm very available if you want to have a quick conversation just to talk about your case. I'm more than happy to do it. Linda is the director of the program, and she is also available to talk about financials and so forth. And I will hand it over to Bai. And again, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Lavy. And by the way, if you're interested in schedule initial consultation, or you have any question in regards to their clinic, I'm going to send a quick button on the screen. So if you go to the center of the screen and click on Contact Us, at least lead you to the website where you can fill out your information and choose your preferential appointment time, and the representative will reach back and schedule you for the appointments. If you just have some general questions, feel free to call, and they will get your questions addressed. And the first slide is about a surrogate cost. I know that's probably the most concerning part of building family through surrogacy and egg donation. This slide represents the number in majority in the state of California, because the cost of living and everything is a little bit higher, and also the surrogate candidates you were able to find in California is they're just simply more competitive. Everybody, because since California is one of the first states that where surrogacy, gestational surrogacy are widely practiced. But in a place, we do have a surrogate from all over the country. If you don't care, if that's less of your concern, the geographic location of your GC is less of your concern. Surrogate from other states, particularly on the East Coast, Midwest, or the South, are significantly cheaper. You can save more than 10,000 on our part. So I'm just talking about in general, what the fee constitutes. So pretty much the surrogate screening and the management fee, for the agency. So pretty much before we pass the candidate to the clinic, that consists of the screening of their criminal background, to obtain all their medical records. And we do have an on-site nurse to pre-screen all their medical record and put notes on every single one of the past medical history, that what will be what would negatively impact her ability to become a surrogate, and we'll pass all that notes and all her medical records to the clinic later on. And also what we're looking at is we do a soft pull on their credit report to make sure she doesn't have any significant outstanding financial debt, because we don't want making money become her primary motive. So that's roughly that part. And we do sometimes depends on in terms of criminal record. If the surrogate is not from surrounding area, because we're located in California, we will send a private investigator to do a quick home visit to make sure she lives in a good environment. And we don't accept applicants that live in a Section 8 voucher housing. That type, so pretty much make sure she has a good comfortable living environment. And legal fee, every state's a little bit different, but of course in California it costs a little bit more, but in other states it costs a little less than that. So basically it consists of two parts. One is the surrogacy contract. So intended parents would appoint their own attorney to draft up the surrogacy contract, and the surrogate will gather independent counsel to help her review and negotiate the terms and conditions on the surrogacy contract. And once that's done, it gets notarized. We call it legally clear, and she will then move to the clinic will then start the FET count, the frozen embryo transfer calendar. She will start to take injectable medication to get prepared for the transfer. And the next big part is a surrogate benefit package. Not only does it include her base compensation, like I mentioned, in the state, in other states they're significantly lower. It also includes miscellaneous allowance to cover the mileage, the wear, pretty much the wear and tear of her car, because she constantly have to go to fertility clinic, then later on obstetricians, then of course the prenatal supplements, so all the miscellaneous stuff, her her maternity clothing. Of course, as her body changes, she will need a different set of clothing, and some stuff like housekeeping after she get she were heavily into her pregnancy, then she not very convenient for her to move around to clean up the house. So starting in the certain weeks into her gestation, she will start to get housekeeping allowance to help her cover that. The other thing, the last part of the surrogacy cost, it kind of fluctuates the most, is the surrogate insurance cost. If you happen to be matched with a surrogate during the we call it open enrollment window for our international guests. It's between, normally for the majority of the states, between November 1st to December 15th. In some states they extended it. For example, New York, in the state of New York, like right next to Connecticut, and the California. In California this year, they extended all the way to the end of February. But in majority of the state is, or the federal law, determines is you only have that 45-day window. But if your surrogate lucky enough to get enrolled during the open enrollment period, that's a significant savings on surrogates maternity care medical costs. If you weren't lucky enough to get that, still there are many factors that determine if you can get a regular Affordable Care Act insurance. For example, if the surrogate changed her zip code, she moved to a new job. But if rare or fortunate she couldn't get those kind of insurance, there are a few specialty insurance normally backed by the Lloyd's of London. Even though the cost is significantly higher, but you still have options. And the least option we normally would advise strongly against is to pay cash, because there's just simply too many uncertainties. Of course, if it's up to you, if that's what you decide to do, you just gotta we just gonna advise you. There's a strong possibility anything happen, the surrogate's medical bill will skyrocket, and because you guys have a binding legal contract, you are obligated to pay whatever medical costs incurred during the surrogacy journey. So that's something we would strongly advise against. Okay. So after we did the initial screening of her criminal background, her driving record to see any reckless behavior, her credit report, we get all her medical record, get a pre-screen to make sure it's ESRM compliant. Before we pass her medical records to the clinic, you would have what we call it a match meeting. We do have an online pool for you to see all the surrogate profiles. So if you go to the center of your screen and hit the button learn more, that leads you to a profile page where you have a filter on the left hand side. You can choose the state, the minimum age, maximum age, experienced surrogate. Once you click into any of those profiles, you'll be able to see her more detailed information. And we do have an appointment booking function right on there. So if you like to meet any of those big-hearted women that's willing to help, that's the advantage of using our online surrogates profile pool. And after you match with the surrogate, of course there's many factors that determine if it's a good match. For example, religious belief. Used to have parents and surrogate both very devout Christian. They like to and the parents wanted their future baby to be affected in a particular way. So they look for Christian only surrogates. We do have other cases where just like Dr. Lavy mentioned, there's parents that only wants their surrogate to carry twins. And in the application we will ask you, there's many things that we ask during the application process. Your religious belief, your life philosophy, your life attitude, some trivial stuff, your favorite movie, your favorite childhood dream, something like that would kind of give intended parents. Well, intended parents have the same, have very similar application too. So pretty much it will, big or small, it'll reflect your general, life philosophy, ideology, to see if you guys a good match. Then, during the match interview, if you guys live close by to each other, of course that will be in person. and that's preferably that that's the ideal way to do it. Majority of the cases, you will do a Zoom call, but still that's a good way to kind of fill it out. If you guys are the right match. And then after that step, your medical record will get reviewed by the clinic, and the clinic will make a determination, whether you are, you're good to become a surrogate. If so, then you will physically go into the clinic, and the doctor, the intended parent's physician will check, will check your uterus, to see if the uterus lining at the right thickness. And of course, there are a bunch of other required blood work and tests to see if you're taking drugs, if alcohol, tobacco, and all that, and all different benchmark to make sure that you are suitable for a surrogacy journey. And in the meantime, you will go through a psychological screening evaluation to make sure that you're mentally fit to become a surrogate candidate. Then after that, I kind of already explained, there's a surrogacy contract part, and after you graduate from IVF, approximately 10 weeks after the frozen embryo transfer, then you will get to that pre-birth court. In majority of states, it's called a pre-birth court order, in California. So pretty much you get to establish your parentage even before the baby's born. And so once the baby's born, the certificate of birth, those state the issue will have your name instead of a surrogate parent's name on it. So that's one of the advantages to choose state where pre-birth court orders are allowed. And unfortunately, both Connecticut and California allow pre-birth court order. In other states where surrogacy is legal but pre-birth court order is not allowed, you can still do it post-birth. It just gotta spend a few extra time to do it, because normally they will have a birth certificate that have a surrogate's name. If she has a partner, her partner name will be on it too. Then you just have to go to the court, and the judge will make a determination if you're going to be a good parent. Then the name will be swapped out with intended parents' names. So after 10 to the regular 9 months pregnancy, then you will have this part, I think the most important part is the coordination of insurance, to make sure that you maximize the insurance benefits, to make sure she doesn't the candidate doesn't go out of network to incur extra medical costs. But that's pretty much that's part of our job, to make sure that the surrogates do what she's told, and to help you reduce the overall cost and the stress. Okay, and also because of the pandemic, we come up with another option. So pretty much you're comfortable. We have abundant education material on the website and everything. So if you're comfortable to manage the cases yourself, so pretty much you can imagine willing to communicate with the surrogate, and remind her, and for all her appointments, and to pretty much coordinate the whole journey by yourself. We do have an option. Pretty much we slash the agency fee, where you only pay a flat search fee for our effort to get you the pre-screened surrogates. That cost that can slash another additional 20 to 30,000. In addition to I already say out-of-state surrogates already save you abundant money. So that's something that we offer too. If a cost is really something that will prevent you from going there. And a second option is that there's a bunch of other financing options, because we understand there's a tremendous amount of money that you have to spend on surrogacy. So what we also do, we partner with a different specialty financing company. We work with Prosper Health Lending, and so pretty much they loan up to 100,000 with terms up to 84. And if you are in the United States and you own real estate properties and you have a positive equity on it, that would be enough to cover it. That might be a preferential financing options, because a mortgage, as cheap as it is, as the long-term interest rate drop to the lowest the probably the lowest in the history, that would be something to think about to take advantage of first. But if that or home equity line of credits is not available to you, this is the other. We do provide other options. Yeah, so that covers the surrogacy, and we do. And by the way, for egg donation, we do have a similar online database or online profile pool for you to go and take a look. Our specialty is a high education candidate. So candidate with high candidates with higher education. So we have not too many, but a few Ivy League educated egg donors. If that's something you look you strongly care about, that's something we will offer. But in general, top 30, top 50 university is our specialty. So if you look for for example, a candidate from New York University or University of Connecticut, or Yale. So far, we did have a Yale, but of course, those kind of candidates got matched very quickly. But that's something that we specialized in. Okay, so that concludes my part on the the surrogacy match cost and the process part. And we do have quite a few questions. So, Dr. Lavy, how much time do you have for the Q&A section?
As much time as we need.
Okay, so we can go through the one on the live webinar first, and then we're gonna collect. In the meantime, Liz will collect the question from YouTube, Facebook, and also Tencent, on WeChat too. Okay, so one of our guests said, I was wondering the success rate of IVF. If my first cycles failed, what should I do?
Well, it's of course it's not an easy question to answer, but without getting more information exactly, who you are, your age, what kind of embryos you had, genetic testing. But I think in a simple way to what we find that if you have a genetically tested embryo, because I saw somebody ask about that, and I'm a very big proponent of doing genetic testing. If you have a genetically tested embryo, the normal genetically tested embryo, and you have a normal uterus, then with one embryo, you should expect close to 80% success. Now, the thing is, of course, it depends on your age, and as women get into their late 30s and early 40s, the number and the quality of their eggs decrease, and at the same time, the quality of the embryos decreases. But if you have a genetically normal embryo, then the chances are still the same. So in other words, if you take someone who's 45 and takes an embryo that was created from an egg donor and is genetically normal, her chances of success, having a successful pregnancy, are the same as someone who's 40 or 35 or 30. So again, it's really just a matter of the embryos, the uterus, and of course the sperm.
Testing. Okay, and Doc, I got another one. Is the polycystic patient, so pretty much the PCOS or PCOS patient.
I can't hear.
Sorry, Dr. Lavy. So one of the other guys is on the screen right now. He's asking about, he or she is asking about a polycystic patient. So can polycystic, or PCOS patient do IVF cycles? Mm-hmm.
Yes, so PCOS is actually a very common, I'd say the most common hormone imbalance, the most common hormone abnormality in young women. So we see many women with polycystic ovaries, and polycystic ovaries, it's sort of it's a term that includes many different conditions, many different hormone imbalances. So I think with polycystic ovaries, for me, the key is to identify exactly what type of polycystic ovary you have, and then prepare you for IVF, depending on your condition. And that way you can expect to get better eggs and better success.
Absolutely. Okay. And Doc, I have another one on a Facebook Live, and this one is from first name Thomas. Worked for Google New York, and our company was a contract with Progeny. insurance. Just wonder if your clinic would accept progeny policies.
Well, we work with different insurance companies, so we just have to check to see exactly the terms. But yes, I mean, if you have insurance and your insurance is paying for it and we participate, we're more than happy to work with you.
Awesome. And the next one is from Tencent, and it's an international guest. I think, even though Tencent is more like a Chinese centered, but I think this will be a good question for all the international guests. So pretty much, I, living in want to minimize, pretty much I do intend to come to the U.S. for, the IVF surrogacy, potentially with an egg donor. What I wanted, but I was wondering if we can pre-start the protocol, since many medication can be found in a foreign country too. So can we pre-start the protocol just so by the time to minimize, the time that we spent in the United States?
Absolutely, and we do it actually quite a bit. So it depends on where you are, and we will find a local clinic, a convenient local clinic that will basically that we trust and we know will do a good job. Depending on, again, your country, either we find the medications locally, or in many cases we actually can ship you the medications from here. But yes, we can, and that way, especially for IVF, because to prepare for IVF, it's about a 2-week process. So if you have a place like that, and we have good communication with them, we can minimize the number of days that you have to spend in the US for the actual procedure.
Awesome. Okay. Another one is from international guests too. So pretty much, we heard about, how COVID would, impact, especially earlier this year, in May, we heard about how it would impact male fertility. It's like like doctor, what you explained is it doesn't get into a sperm and or uterus, but what it negatively impact the long-term health, especially some people when they when they got the COVID, and after a while, they even after they're recovered, they still have lethargy, for example, or all different kind of symptoms that would negatively impact their long-term health. So wonder, like, because this guy's pretty much it's in foreign language in Chinese, but what he said is like, I did have an agency that matched me with a surrogate. Later on, she was found COVID positive, but later, but of course, then she recovered from the COVID. But should I still proceed with GC candidates that have the COVID but recover from later on?
Yeah, so I think in general the answer is yes. As I said, most of the surrogate or the candidates are young and healthy women. So even when they get COVID, it's usually not very severe, and they usually have minimal symptoms and recover very quickly. In a way, maybe it's a good thing, because then you know that she's not going to get it again when she's pregnant. But certainly having a surrogate that had COVID is not, if she's healthy and she passes all the testing, is not a reason to reject her.
Okay. On the screen here it says how long the entire IVF process will take.
So as I showed you on that slide, from the if we have the sperm and we have the egg donor, we basically start with the donor's cycle, and within 1 month we have the embryos frozen and tested, and we get the results.
Okay. And how will the medication affect my body during and after the IVF process?
So the medication for IVF basically are actually natural hormones, and I will design the protocol, the cocktail of medication based on your particular situation, based on your age, based on your hormone level. So the idea is that these drugs would actually boost up your ovarian function and boost up your egg production. So typically for an egg donor, I said we get about 15 to 20 eggs because they're so young. Someone who's in their 30s, we usually get about 10 eggs. And usually the side effects have to do with not so much with the drugs, but just the fact that your ovaries are more active and your hormone levels are higher. And we keep very close tabs on that. And that's why while you're on the medication, you have to go in every few days to get checked. And then we see how you feel and how you respond. We make the adjustments and basically make sure that you go through the process with minimal discomfort and of course, safely.
Okay. And the question from Tencent Lai and so pretty much fresh egg versus frozen eggs.
Well, that's actually a good question, and we can spend a long time discussing it. I think that I would just say that, you know, the technology for freezing eggs has come a very long way in the last 5 or 10 years. So it used to be that, you know, frozen eggs were definitely not first choice. Nowadays, you know, the frozen eggs, actually, the technology is good. And when you freeze and use the frozen eggs, the results are, I would say, almost as good as they are with fresh eggs. My preference is still to use fresh eggs over frozen eggs, but but you know, again, as time goes on and the technology improves, I'm much more comfortable working with frozen eggs.
Awesome. Another one from Tencent is actually on the screen right now. I'm going to translate it. So pretty much what she this woman say, I had a last time I went through a fertility testing, had a extremely low AMH. I'm relatively young, in my late 20s, and you know, higher range, you know, over, you know, a higher range of at a higher range of follicle stimulating hormone, you know, FSH. Are they the only indicators, like to know if I have a bad, you know, ovarian reserve?
Well, we usually use we call it the panel for
Mm-hmm.
testing, which basically includes the AMH, the FSH, the estradiol, estrogen levels, and an ultrasound. And that gives you a pretty good idea of what your ovarian reserve is like, which basically tells you how many eggs you have left, because women have all their eggs when they're born. And indirectly, that number actually tells you essentially how many eggs you expect to get when you do IVF. Indirectly, it tells you the quality of the eggs and, of course, the chances of having a success. So regardless of your age, having low ovarian reserve generally suggests that the chances are less. But
Mm-hmm.
of course, you know, it's always possible. You just have to figure out how to work around it.
Okay. She also did add a follow-up question. So it's pretty much you know, I've been, you know, on a side note, I've been using anabolic and androgenic steroids, you know, to tone out my body. Uh, do you think that's the reason why it affects my, you know, fertility indicators?
Well, the thing about the AMH, one of the reasons we use it as a marker, as an indicator, is because it's generally not affected by most things. It's not affected by your cycle. It's not affected what medication you take. It's not even affected by your general health. So it gives you a
Okay,
really true picture of your ovarian function.
I see. I see. So those are outside medication factors doesn't really impact per
Probably not.
reserve.
Probably not.
Okay. And on the screen here, can you explain the difference, you know, between 3 to 5 day embryos?
Yes. So actually here, we have the right slide up here. So basically, once we retrieve the eggs and we create the embryos right here, then we start to watch the embryos develop in the laboratory. And we have certain expectation of how they grow. And basically, just by watching them, just by looking at them, you can very quickly tell the difference between a viable embryo and an embryo that's not so viable. And of course, the longer you watch them, the more you can tell. So for example, the embryos can look great initially, but after 3 days or definitely after 5 or 6 days, they start not to look so good. So my preference, and you know, in my practice, I almost always grow the embryos to the 5th and the 6th day because of that information that we get. Also, that allows you to do the genetic testing, which is important. But this is in the olden days of IVF, which is 5-10 years ago, it was more common to transfer the embryos early, mostly because we didn't have the right technology, the equipment, the environment to let the embryos grow in the lab. So of course, I mean that translates if you have a day 5 embryo, what's called a blastocyst, one versus a day 3 embryo. If you transfer one or the other, the day 5 embryo has a much higher chance of success.
Okay, awesome. And another follow-up question by the lady that asked you about the previous ones on Tinsa, and she also asked for increase ovarian reserve purposes. Are there any good supplements that you would recommend?
Well, the thing just to know about the ovarian reserve, and essentially, like as I said, women have all their eggs when they're born, and then they slowly lose eggs. So we don't have any medication or any procedure that allows you to create new eggs. So essentially, you just have to work with the eggs that you have. Now, of course, in order to optimize, to maximize the chances, we use all different supplements. Mostly the supplements basically are in the category of what we call antioxidants. And that basically improves general health and can improve the quality of the eggs that you already have.
Okay, antioxidants. Okay. And so pretty much it was asking to common antioxidant supplements. Like what type of antioxidant supplements that which you would recommend?
Well, one of the most common that is prescribed is called CoQ10.
CoQ10.
It's readily available. You can get it in the health food store, and it does. I mean, it does do that. I mean, it's definitely an antioxidant, and it basically improves the health of the tissues in the body.
Okay, and one other one, I think this one is on YouTube, and I think the question is for both of us. And what are the advantages of doing IVF and surrogacy on the East Coast versus West? For I guess my I kind of explained that in my surrogacy call slide. This is because East Coast surrogates because it's not as competitive as the West Coast, so the surrogacy compensation of course is going to be lower. And it's not as popular as in the West Coast. So you have less competition, so they have a lower compensation. So in general, the surrogacy is more affordable. And I think that's the same case for IVF, Dr. Lavy.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yep.
Okay, I think if a cost is one of your concerns here, you definitely save a significant amount of money by going to East Coast, especially I saw there's a guest from Germany here in our webinar. So yeah, so that's this is a shorter flight. I think that's another advantage. Depends on where you live. East Coast is definitely a shorter flight. Yeah, so I think that's all the questions that our guests have. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Lavy, for attending this webinar. It's really educational, informative, and for our guests, I know I did a call to action for you to go to a website. If you're on YouTube, Facebook, you might not get the link, but we'll make sure everybody gets a follow-up email to so you'll get all the link and the correct information. And if you ever need to talk to either one of us or organizations to get all your problems addressed, yeah, so still, the holidays are soon approaching, so like to hear this. Dr. Lavy and I are wishing like to wish everybody a happy holidays and stay safe, and we'll overcome this pandemic, especially with the news. Vaccines are coming, and hopefully everybody will have a smooth IVF or surrogacy egg donor journeys afterwards. Yeah. Thanks again. Dr. Lavy, you want to like to say anything to the guests?
Well, again, Dubai, thank you for having me, and thank you all the participants for being here. And I wish you luck. You know, it's not an easy decision. It's a big step to take, but it definitely can be life-changing. And you know, we are here. You know, the agency and the clinic to try and make it real, make it happen.
Awesome. All right. Thanks. Happy holidays, y'all. And yeah, this concludes our webinar.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.